Okay, good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank Pam for asking me to come to speak to you all. Organ donation is a subject that is very close to me. It wasn't always that way. My oldest sister, received a kidney donation back in 1988. And that's when I started thinking about it, but it still wasn't a very close subject to me. A few years later, my niece received another kidney donation, and it still didn't hit me how important it was. In June 1994 came the day that would change my life, shatter it completely, and it would also change my views on organ donation. June 17th, 1994, my 6-year-old daughter, Cecilia, was hit by a car. Her injuries were very substantial. She had 2 shattered thighs. Her liver was torn, and her brain started bleeding and swelling. From the scene of the accident, she was taken to Bethesda Hospital in Steinbach, where we lived. And after about an hour, they let me come into the room to see her, and already I could see her eyes had started to swell, and they were helping her breathe with one of those baggy things. And I said, "Oh my God, she's dead. You're breathing for her. Why are you doing that?" And they said, no, we're just helping her to breathe. And they said, she's young, she's strong. We're going to transport her to the Health Sciences Center, and they'll do further, more extensive testing. So to the Health Sciences Center we came. And finally, the doctors came out to talk to me, and they said that her brain was swelling at a very rapid rate. And the next 24 hours would tell the story. But first, they needed her brain to stop swelling. A few hours later, they came out and told me that they had to do chest massage on her. Her heart had stopped beating. And they got it going again. But the next 48 hours would tell the tale. A little while later, they came back, and it was 72 hours. And I kept looking at all these amounts of hours as a good sign, because it kept getting, longer and longer. So it's like, okay, that gives her more time to get better. And I didn't understand anything about brain death. I thought brain death was like being in a coma, and I had heard of people coming out of comas. I saw it in movies, so it had to be true. Finally, in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, they came out and they told me that she was brain dead. Her brain had no activity. But they were going to do more testing a few hours later before they could officially declare her as brain dead. So a little later that morning, my oldest sister, who had received a kidney transplant, came up to me and said, "Cheryl, have you thought of organ donations?" And I said, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. If everything should just go wrong, that's what I want to do. So I went and I told the nurses, I said, but only if everything goes wrong. Like not a minute before that. And they said, okay, we were going to ask you about that, but we were going to wait a little while longer. So at 10 o'clock, 2 doctors called me into a room, just the 3 of us, and they told me that Cecilia was officially declared brain dead. And we sat and talked for about half an hour, and I was just very I don't understand why this is happening. But she was brain dead. That was the end of that. And a little while later, Starbagan from the transplant team came down and talked to me, and we signed up all the papers, and everything was in motion now. And they said, now we just need to find some recipients. And I thought to myself, well, you can take for the rest of your natural lives, as far as I'm concerned, because so long as I could still see her breathe, and she was on life support, I could still see her breathe. Then I started begging her to wake up, and I started begging God to give me a miracle. A little later on in the late afternoon, they came and they said that they had a recipient for Cecilia's heart, and they had a recipient for her lungs. The heart was going to go to Edmonton, and as soon as the team touched down at the Winnipeg airport, they were going to take Cecilia in and start doing the operation. And I said, no. We need recipients for her kidneys, because I gave her kidneys too. We don't have any recipients for her kidneys, so we have to wait. And they said, no. Her kidneys can hold out for a little longer, but we have to get the heart and we have to get the lungs. So at 8:35 that night, they took my little girl, into the operating room, and the operations began. And I sat outside in that hallway, just hoping somebody would come and say, you know what, it's the weirdest thing, but she opened her eyes. But that didn't happen. And I saw the team from Edmonton go by at a pretty fast clip. They were almost running. And they stopped, turned around, came back, and they asked me if I was the mother of the donor, and I said, yep. And they gave me a hug, and they talked to me for a little bit, and then they went on their way. And after all the operations were over, I went into the recovery room to see my little girl for the last time. And then I did one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I walked out of that hospital without her, which hadn't have been my plan. But I had to do it. And I remember walking out, I remember thinking, well, God didn't grant me my miracle. And it wasn't until many, many years later that I realized God did grant me my miracle. He granted me 5, all in the form of her organ donors, or her organ recipients, I should say. Her heart went to a 6.5-year-old little girl in Edmonton. That little girl is 25 today. Her lungs went to a 9-year-old little boy who had cystic fibrosis and was in the hospital at that same time. And they actually weren't really holding out much hope for him to live any longer until he got her lungs. Her eyes were donated to 2 people who had their sight restored. And her kidney went to a 39-year-old man. And when I was listening to Pam talk about people who are on dialysis, this man was on dialysis for 19 years before he got his kidney from Cecilia. So after 19 years of being in a dialysis prison, he was actually free. And I have heard from him. He went back to work, first part-time, then he went back to work full-time. So I did get my miracles. And all these things happened because of one 6-year-old little girl who left the world too soon. I remember when I was in the hospital and the doctors came to tell me that Cecilia was brain dead and that was it. I remember how cold they both were and how typically unfeeling. And I was just charged like to the hilt with emotion. I was scared, I was angry, I was sad, I was grief-stricken. And these 2 doctors came across as being so cold. And what I want to say to you today is that as you venture forth into your medical careers, is take time to realize that these people are going through so much, and just a simple hand on the shoulder, look them in the eye, a simple "I'm sorry" will go a long way in helping you to help them. My nurses were so great. They sat, they listened to me. One nurse said, "Tell me about her," which I totally appreciate right to this day. I remember it so vividly. And I realized that as doctors, you may not have that gift of time to do that, but just even, a hand on their hand and just a simple "I'm sorry" will help you go a long way in helping these people. Okay? Thank you very much for listening.